Russia would choose a place that is vulnerable, not resilient, and has not modernized its army enough. So the Europeans have to deal with the impact and the fallout of decisions done in the Kremlin. Vladimir Putin has decided to break up the security system, so now the Europeans have to deal with that, whether they like it or not. But this is the new normal. So now Europe has actually to turn it around and try to make sure that the US understands that we are able to do everything ourselves.
There have been reported warnings from several Western intelligence services that Russia may be preparing some kind of hostile military operation or provocation against the Baltics, against Poland, to test NATO. How likely do you think such a scenario is?
Well, it's not a single service. It's now really a number of services that are pointing to the direction of this possibility. It's still a possibility, and the fact that intelligence services are publicly talking about this is already quite significant. I mean, intelligence services are usually working on a less public level. This is both very, very useful and also shows to the significance and to the concern that they are seeing in this, and they want to make sure that people understand how serious the threat is, and what are the necessary, because then from there you find the necessary solutions if you want to prevent a situation like this, right? Because this is where we are. We are in a situation where Europe is doing everything it can to make sure that Russia understands that it's still not really worth to attack or to provoke or to do any kind of incidents in Europe. And the deterrence that we want to create is critical for making sure that we can continue to live the life that as we live. So what we also see, and we have done some Globsec research on this, in the countries where the governments actually have this very open, frank discussion with the population about the nature of the threat and about what is necessary to counter them, they are much more predictable. Also in the sense of being part of collective defense in NATO. So they are not only creating better conditions for sustaining the investment into defense, they're also creating good conditions for the population to be able to discuss and agree to difficult political decisions, like reintroduction of compulsory military service, or diverting investment from even healthcare or education into defense because the situation is so serious. If you don't have the kind of serious discussion about this, then people don't really understand why you need to spend so much money on defense. Why is it so necessary to bring in more people into the military because they can go and have a wonderful successful business life or whatever. So you have to be very open and frank. If the situation is seen as this, that Russia is actually thinking about this, then the population has to know, and that's from that point of view, it's very good that it's already out there.
And NATO finds itself in a quite precarious position right now. While the US is rushing to reduce its military presence in Europe, Europe is still ramping up its defense capabilities. Do you think that this presents kind of an ideal window for Russia to try and test Europe's defenses?
Well, first of all, we have statements from the US about withdrawing and then not withdrawing, and so that creates a little bit of ambiguity, which actually is good for deterrence, right? If Russia doesn't know, then it helps. But we expect the decisions from the US to be made on their presence in Europe. The public debate is very open, and it's very also risky to have such a discussion in public about this. But what it also created is momentum to have also a more formal and official discussion about this with the US, or either on the NATO platform or in bilateral meetings. So what I would say is it's very important to come to a mutual understanding about how this potential drawdown or adjustment in the force will be going on in time, right? It's very important to see how quickly the Europeans can replace the capabilities that the US might or might not take away from Europe, because they need some time to rebuild the capacities. Obviously, the time does not really, fit with the U.S. Announced plans or potential plans. So they need to do it quicker, and now the discussion has to be how much quicker it has to be and how long the U.S. should wait with their discussions. In that sense, if the discussion is going on, then Russia knows that there's no opportunity. But if we see any hasty decisions on either side, then that could be again misinterpreted by Russia or seen as an opportunity, and then we get into dangerous situations.
Could you talk a bit more about what kind of capabilities Europe would need to address more if the US withdraws its presence?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we call the strategic enablers, and so that's a lot about logistics. The big planes, the tanker planes, the mobility that you need to move forces across the Atlantic, but also from from the Netherlands to the eastern flank, or from Portugal or Spain to Slovakia, as we have now in Slovakia, Spanish soldiers. I mean, some of the logistics capabilities there we depend very much on the capacity that there is from the U.S. Force, but it's also intelligence, surveillance, these kind of enablers that are critical for quick reaction, for understanding what's going on in the battlefield. And then obviously a critical shortage, but this is not only in Europe, but also in NATO and in general, of air defense systems and ammunition.
You touched upon the topic of conscription, and it seems to be the elephant in the room when everybody's discussing defense spending, industrial production, but many European nations actually struggle with finding enough people to serve in the armed forces. Do you think that broader pivot to conscription is inevitable?
So yeah, that's what we used to do in the past, right? We need more soldiers, so we hire them and employ them full time. It looks like that's not what we need anymore, right? What do you need? What is the first line of defense that you need once the crisis starts actually ramping up? Well, you need people who are good in communication, who are good in IT, software and computer skills, right? Hackers. Basically, you need people who understand satellites. So it's not really, the shooters or the fighters that you need in the first place. So you need to create a pool of people who are available at a very short notice for the state to work with the military on some of the critical tasks to defend, and to also show that we are able to bounce back from a possible attack or provocation, right? So in that sense, you need to create, and this is what most countries are doing, right? You need to create a system of having people in reserve in some kind of a regime, or a setup to be able to give them the training that you need them to be at the level of readiness that they are, but that they also can work in their usual civilian life, and come work for the government and for the military whenever the country needs them. Because to train like the fighters, people shooting with rifles and operating some of the military equipment. I mean, you can do that once it really goes into a situation where you expect an attack, right? We have seen that Ukraine has trained most of their soldiers during the war, right? I mean, the training that was happening also here in Europe was going quite quick to provide the necessary scale of the military force for those kind of tasks. But the really very specific professions and the experts that you need and I mentioned a few of those are the people that you need to identify beforehand.
There have been several cases of Russian drones or missiles entering NATO territory. And what happened that, except for, let's say, the one case in Poland, NATO forces were reluctant to engage, to shoot down the Russian drones. Could this be another Achilles heel for Europe, just unwillingness to respond forcefully, to pull the trigger?
Well, that's a little bit part of us living in peace, right? I mean, that seems to be the most important limitation. We kind of consider this as something that is not really an act of a war situation, but it's a crisis situation where our air forces or whomever is responsible for this, they first and foremost want to make sure that the drone or whatever is not hitting any critical infrastructure. That's one, but also it's a money issue. I mean, if you have drones flying into the airspace, each of them costs like 20,000, and you have to bring each of them down with a rocket that costs $500,000. That's not really something that you want to do, right? So in this sense, it's very complicated. Very complicated. It's challenging for the European or NATO countries to respond to this kind of provocations. But the less we do, the more we give an argument to Russia to do this again. So we probably should find a balance about being able to do more. And there's a lot going on already, right? The drone wall or project is already going on for some time. So hopefully it will deliver some good capabilities to deal with this kind of threats.
Before we continue, I just want to stop to remind you that the Kyiv Independent is an audience-funded media organization. We can make videos like this, frontline reports, interviews, and explainers, all thanks to the members of our beloved Kyiv Independent community. We are now approaching an important milestone for us, 35,000 members. And if you want to help us get there, support independent journalism, do become a member for as little as $5 a month. The link is in the description below, or you can scan the QR code. Thank you.
Last year in The Hague, the Allies agreed to raise defense-related spending to 5% of GDP. Is this enough? And has the money been well spent so far?
So whether it's enough, so the 5% is not a made-up number, right? I know that the discussion or the presentation has been like, this is what Donald Trump requires from the Europeans. But in fact, NATO has gone through a series of very important decisions in the summits coming from Madrid through Vilnius, Hague, and now here in Ankara, where basically what NATO has done is looked at the threat. This is the requirements that we need to, this is what we need to do. This is a threat, this is how we're going to fight it. This is the requirements, what we need for it. And then they actually divided the requirements into national targets, as they always do. And when you count what is necessary, you come up with 3.5% of GDP for military equipment, and then 1.5 for the support, for the enablement, for the logistics, for the resilience building that you need to make sure that you can actually move the forces, that countries on the eastern flank can actually receive them. So it's not a number that is arbitrary. It's a number that comes out from the requirement and is derived from the threat and the plans. So in that sense, it should be enough. It is the number that we need. If the situation keeps on changing as it is, more technology, more demanding equipment, then the price that could go even higher. But what we see also with in comparison, all the investment that you spend into preventing a conflict is much cheaper than dealing with a conflict and then the reconstruction. And unfortunately, Ukraine is showing us that example very vividly. If countries can spend this in the next years as they have promised, then it's going to be fine.
As you yourself mentioned, one of the reasons why this number appeared and why the Allies agreed on this 5% was to get Donald Trump on board, to stabilize relationship with the US. But what really followed was a period of tensions and disputes over Greenland, over Iran. Even during this summit, Trump once again brought the issue of Greenland. What lessons should Europe draw from this, about its relationship with the US, about its security ties with the United States?
I think the first lesson is that rhetoric is different than what is happening. Words are different than deeds. So that's already something. We shouldn't get too excited about every sentence that we hear from the White House. That is, for me, one of the lessons that we have seen in Trump's second term. For sure. I mean, this is the third time the Greenland issue comes around. Well, let's see whether we have any movement on that this time. I mean, I'm not saying that we should, but there is a chance that it will be overtaken by other topics as well. The other lesson is that this is the new normal. This is the new situation. This is the kind of unpredictability and situation where the Europeans have to deal with the impact and the fallout of decisions done in the Kremlin. Right, Vladimir Putin has decided to break up the security system, so now the Europeans have to deal with that, whether they like it or not. And Donald Trump has decided to use this kind of rhetoric to basically create the conflicting situations that he likes to use for his negotiations. it's also not a choice by the Europeans. They simply have to deal with it, and they have to find a way to be able to go along with it and actually try to push their interests in this yes, increasingly complex and complicated situation. But it's really a grown-up game, and the Europeans should be there.
So should the conversation be less about what will make the US happy, what will keep Trump happy, but more about how to make sure that Europe can stand on its own feet?
And those are not mutually exclusive, I would say, right? I mean, if the paradox is the more the Europeans have a clear idea about how they are able to do things alone, the more the US will be interested to be involved in Europe, right? Because they will not feel this responsibility and the heavy pressure of doing it without the Europeans, right? So the paradoxic situation is actually in the past we used to be trying to persuade the US to keep being engaged by doing as the minimum necessary to keep them engaged, right? So now Europe has actually to turn it around and try to make sure that the US understands that we are able to do everything ourselves. This is what we need you to do for this time and that time, which would be a strong argument for the US to be engaged. So the relationship has to be reformatted in this way.
When we talk about defense readiness along NATO's eastern flank, we saw quite significant discrepancies. Let's say the Nordics, the Baltics spent much more on defense, spent much more on supporting Ukraine, whereas countries like the Czech Republic or Slovakia, which themselves are in Ukraine's vicinity, go in the opposite direction. They are more reluctant to raise defense spending, to invest, to support Ukraine. How would you explain to this? Why is this happening in the countries that are so close to Ukraine?
It's interesting, yes, to see that, because in the let's call it the first 2 years of the full-scale invasion into Ukraine, we have seen that the understanding of what is necessary to support Ukraine and counter Russia, so that Ukraine can defend against a full-scale invasion, was more felt in the eastern countries, right? And then in the Western countries in Europe, we thought that the motivation to do that was less and less the farther you move away from the border with Ukraine or Russia. Now it seems to be turned around. In some cases, especially, you mentioned those countries. So one of them is a little bit of fatigue. I'm fully admitting that, but also, and especially in Slovakia's case, I also think it's increasingly the case in the Czech Republic. It's the reflection of the political discussion that there is, right? I mean, if you have politicians and representatives of government institutions who are trying to persuade people that there is no real threat, there's nothing really going on, and that peace is basically just achievable like that, then the people feel like then we shouldn't be trying too hard, and we should we just don't understand why everybody else is not thinking this way. But it's a complete misinterpretation of what's going on. And I mentioned this before, this is not an open and frank discussion. This is basically manipulating your population into thinking that we don't have to do that, and shifting all of the burden to the other countries. So in that sense, to keep the collective defense working and the deterrence, if Slovakia and Czech Republic are not providing enough to build up their forces in the spirit of the capabilities that they have agreed to in NATO, then the other countries in NATO have to take over. That's one thing. That's one problem. So you ask somebody else to take your share. But also, if you don't develop your forces, then your forces become, in comparison to the other ones on the eastern flank, become less developed, less prepared, and that makes it a nice entry point. You basically make a target out of yourself if and when an incident would be happening, that Russia would be trying to do something. Then of course it's not going to choose a place where there's a lot of soldiers, with good equipment, modern, using technology, and and the population is ready to support the military, which was a place that is vulnerable, not resilient, and has not modernized its army enough. So in that sense, that's not really a wise decision.
Recently in Poland, it was revealed that the Polish government supplied Patriot missiles to Ukraine, and it has been criticized by its domestic political opponents for undermining Poland's defense capabilities. Does it remind you of the situation in Slovakia when the former Slovak government was criticized for sending MiG fighter jets to Ukraine?
Yeah, and S-300 and basically everything else. But yeah, that is part of politics. It's unfortunate. It's not good to see. I mean, in Slovakia, this was clear from the beginning, right? I mean, the moment the government, which was actually doing support for Ukraine, knew exactly that once the opposition comes into power, this is going to be exactly the kind of political messaging that they would be sending. I mean, there's nothing, right? In Slovakia, there's legal cases being mounted, but there's nothing. I mean, the situation is quite clear. But in political terms, it's it's just enough to create this kind of uncertainty for people, and it's dangerous. If you talk about like you jeopardized our security because there's not enough capabilities, you're basically creating a window of opportunity for somebody to miscalculate again the situation and open it up. So basically, you pursue some kind of internal political goals, but risking the overall external or even collective defense situations for your own political goals, which is really dangerous, and the solidarity in that is just non-existent.
There has been this viewpoint we have been hearing from Western capitals recently that Ukraine is turning the tide in the war. Do you agree with this assessment?
Well, it looks certainly that Ukraine is able to do significant damage to the Russian economy, right? I mean, through the fuel crisis or the destruction of some of the infrastructure. It is actually creating the conditions for Russia not to be able to do this for a long time. So, I mean, in that sense, it's not a momentum that would change the war just like that, from one week to another. But it's something that creates conditions that Russia cannot do this forever. Because at points it looked like Russia is able to sacrifice as many personnel, as many people, as many Russians as necessary, or even other nationalities, right? To keep this full-scale invasion going, just to go through the attrition in Ukraine and just win basically on time when Ukraine has run out of soldiers or even the support from the West. So this brings that to that creates a window of time where Russia has to show whether it's able to push or not, and so far we don't see any push. So that means that there's really a momentum on the Ukrainian side.
What do you see as the most realistic path towards something we could define as a Ukrainian victory?
As I already mentioned, the Russian expectation, the miscalculation in Ukraine was they're going to be in Kyiv in 3 days. They've been fighting for the 5th year. So in a way, Ukraine is already winning this. Because they have been able to defend for so long. Ukraine is willing to do whatever to stop this and find a solution. I don't see any signs of such willingness on the Russian side. We don't get any signals from the Kremlin on this, and every opportunity and every possibility that they can use has been turned down. So I'm not really sure that a negotiation or anything like that is possible. So the Ukrainian strategy right now of targeting infrastructure, energy infrastructure, looks like a way of trying to put an end date to this situation.
If you made it to the end of this video, you are probably someone who is interested in better understanding Ukraine and the region. There are over 34,000 people like you in the Kyiv Independent community, and you can join them too. We'd love to have you there. Link is in the description below.